All right, welcome everyone, those of you in class and those of you online who are participating with us tonight. We're going to look at a very specific area of the chart tonight. And what I've been trying to do over the last 4 weeks is get us to train ourselves to focus in different areas. Ultimately, when you sit down to read a chart, you have to focus, and you have to focus on specific things. You focus on planets, you focus on houses, you focus on signs and aspects. Usually you're doing a combination of that. But I am trying to train you to look at singular factors in a chart, because sometimes singular factors give us very pertinent information. Now, in tonight's class, we're going to be looking at generalities of a chart. And so this class is about how do we look at the chart and have an overview of the information contained in the chart. And the overview is broken down into 4 divisions, what are called the societies, trinities, elements, and qualities. These are all determined by the signs of the zodiac. And there's something we learn in a beginning class when we are studying the signs. So, the first that we'll look at tonight are the societies. And these are actually a division of the houses according to which houses are personal, which are companionship, and which are public. The personal houses in a chart are houses 12, 1, 2, and 3. And the personal houses correspond to our innermost being, which is the 12th house, our psyche, our subconscious, our inner space. The physical body is governed by the first house, our personality, our character, our temperament, our self-expression. Our personal wealth is governed by the second house. So this is what you own. What are your personal possessions? What is in your bank account? What is in the trunk of your car? What's in your backpack? What's in your purse? Those are your personal possessions. And then the third house is our private thoughts, our studies, our methods of communicating. So, when there is a predominance of planets in the personal houses, the overall tendency of the individual is to be self-absorbed. The person is either drawn to their inner life and their secrets, their physical body and self-expression, their personal possessions or values, and their private thoughts. That's where the individual lives. So, let's take a look at the chart of someone who has dominant personal houses. When we look at an Astrodyne report, we are looking here under societies. You see personal, companionship, public. It gives the relative Astrodyne power, what the percentage is, and how that is conditioned, whether it's harmoniously or discordantly. If someone is self-absorbed and discordantly self-absorbed, how do you think they might express?
Personal interests.
Personal interest, somebody who wants to throw their weight around, they might be bullying.
To be able to get their way.
Right, because what is their best and greatest interest in the world?
Is themselves.
Getting their way.
Right.
So here's a good example of someone who has dominant personal houses. Here again, what I've used tonight, in tonight's class, I have used all charts that we have previously looked at. So in previous weeks, we've looked at these charts and talked about different facets. And we're doing a review in a sense. Now, if we look at Jimmy Hoffa's chart, let's look at the personal houses. In the 12th house, we have Mars in Capricorn, Uranus in Aquarius, the Sun in Mercury, conjunct in Aquarius. The first house has Venus, and the third house has the Moon and Saturn conjunct in Taurus.
That's where my moon is, 27 Taurus. Isn't that also conjunct the fixed star Algol? Algol,
Yeah.
heavy duty star.
And the moon is exalted in Taurus.
It is, yeah, that balances that out a little, but
Yeah.
it's a heavy place to have moon conjunct Saturn.
Right, those who work with fixed stars attribute grave misfortune to that particular degree. And Algol is, I believe, one of the key stars that makes up the Gorgon's head.
And it is that particular degree, 27, not 26 or 28?
You know, it's not my area of
Okay.
specialty,
Okay.
so.
It was near there, but I wasn't sure that it was right on it.
Yeah, no, it is. I think it's 27 or 29. So definitely near there, and there's a lot of mythology associated with that particular position. So we could see in this chart that personal interests are going to strongly express through the 12th house, which has in this chart 22.6% of the power. What type of personal interest might this man have?
Secret.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't know. They're deep, dark secrets. This is the stuff that goes on in meetings behind closed doors. And this is the stuff you don't generally put in your biography.
Yeah, right.
With all the rest of it underneath the horizon, he wouldn't have that much to write about, except Jupiter, what he wanted to broadcast.
Right, and his work with groups, clubs, organizations, social circles, and the like. But my guess is there were a lot of backroom meetings going on here. And with that dominant 12th house, that could also really create a powerful attraction to the underworld. There is the possibility, when the 12th house is dominant, that one spends some time feeling trapped or imprisoned. This could be anything from, oh, that's a good reminder. I don't think I turned my phone off. Thank you.
Forgive me, I have to take this one.
So, one could feel trapped in the family they're born in. One might have a period in their life where they're hospitalized, stranded on a desert island, or imprisoned in some way.
Entombed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the nature with that 12th house is to oftentimes feel like you're being pushed up against the restrictions of your life, on whatever level that might be, whether it's along the lines of incarceration, or whether it's just wanting to have things your way and feeling like the world's not cooperating with you.
But doesn't Capricorn also rule social identity? So could it be that what he created made him feel like, you know, that sort of imprisoned him through his social identity?
It could be that, or it could be his actions. Because when I think of Mars and Capricorn,
Right.
it's also which impulses you give credence to and which you attempt to control. Generally speaking, Mars in Capricorn is a good placement. It's exalted there.
Mm-hmm.
You have this incredible sign of control, Capricorn,
Right.
enclosing the planet that's usually spinning out in circles, doing things just for the sake of doing things. So Capricorn tends to give some discipline or structure or
Limitations.
it gives limitations, constrictions, or a constructive approach
Mm-hmm.
where the natural instinct is to build up rather than tear down. But nevertheless, with Mars in the 12th house, one can still suffer from violence, and one can,
Hidden enemies.
yes, one can encounter their hidden enemies. So the other personal house that's very strong in this chart is the 3rd house. And here we have, the 1st house is also strong. The 1st house has 16.8%, the 3rd house has 16.3% of the power. So they're almost equal in power. Venus in the 1st house can make for a social personality. But Venus does not do well in Aries because it's the sign opposite her home. So Venus in Aries and in the 1st house could give someone that you might be able to put into a suit, but could still have somewhat of a coarse behavior or mannerism. What stands out here, if we go back to the summary, this is not only powerful, but it is incredibly discordant. And what type of thinking might accompany Moon-Saturn conjunct in the 3rd house? Greedy. Greedy. Yeah, that's very good. Self-interest. Self-centeredness. Saturn operates when those thoughts creep into our minds, which are, grabbing what one can for oneself.
But it's trying Mars.
It's sort of, you're not feeling well, you put the Halloween bag of candy out by the front gate with a note saying, please take one. And some kid will come along and take 2 handfuls. So that's, the nature of Saturn is to, let me grab what I can and screw the rest.
Might also make for a sort of paranoid tone in one's communication, emotional suspicion.
Suspicious, yes. What about, do you think there would be any tendency towards rigidity in this chart? Taurus plus they're squaring Mercury at 26 Aquarius and the Ascendant at 27 Aquarius. So the Moon and Saturn are forming a square to the personality and to the communication. That could make for very terse, very punctuated communication, and somebody who might come across at times as being not a negotiator, though we would expect that with Mercury on the Ascendant, but at times inflexible.
I see it as personal values. he's just caught up in his personal values with Moon and Taurus in the third house.
Yeah, I can see that through the Taurus influence, so normally we would associate one's values with the second.
The thing is, Venus is in first house in Aries.
Yeah, the ruler of his third house falls in the first, so he would certainly think about himself.
Right.
All right, the companionship houses in a chart are houses 4, 5, 6, and 7. So, the fourth house is our companions in the home. The fifth house is our companions in love, or the companionship we experience with our children. The sixth house is our companions in the workplace, our co-workers. And the seventh house is our companions in partnership in life, marriage, mate, and or our general companionships in the public, persons that we partner with, be it in business, professional pursuits, or in professions where you work one-on-one with another. The seventh house can represent your client. So, individuals in whose charts companionship houses predominate express a tendency towards being focused on the other people in their lives, often placing their needs above their own. Example, Charles Windsor. What do we know about him?
Well, not very much.
No, but do we know about people associated with him?
Oh, yeah.
We probably know more about Princess Di
Diana.
or Pamela, Camilla Parker Bowles,
Bowles,
or Prince Harry and
William.
William. Yeah, I'm clearly not up on.
We know a lot
The House
about
of
them
Windsor.
lately.
Yes. Okay. So curiously, and what about his mom? Do we know about
Queen
her?
Elizabeth.
Uh-huh. Curiously, here is a chart where, although this is somebody who has done a lot in the world, people tend to talk more about his associates than
Right.
about him.
About him, yes.
Now, where does he get this strength? Well, come back.
In the fourth house.
Let's look. Companionship, 388.33. It's 42.1%. It's also harmonious. So although his relationship with Diana Spencer was, strongly criticized for not being a happy marriage, nevertheless, one would suspect from his chart that he would draw pleasure from his companionships. Now,
Are you seeing that because of Jupiter conjunct Mars in the fifth?
no,
No.
I'm just seeing
Oh,
it from the
harmony
total
of the
amount of harmony
companionship.
associated with that.
Okay.
Now, we do strongly suspect that planets in the fourth house have a great likelihood of opposing the midheaven in the chart, and or planets in the 10th house. So the fourth house itself, although dominant in this chart at 22.3% of the power, it is discordant. So there can be issues here. What about Neptune and Venus conjunct in the fourth house?
Very idealistic, romantic.
An idealistic, romantic, and this is somebody who might idealize family. This is what the perfect family would be like. What generally happens when we idealize something?
You get disappointed.
Yes, we suffer from disappointment because things don't turn out the way we have fantasized or imagined.
I sort of see him, from a personal perspective, as a split personality type person. One part's hidden, and the other part is expressed very well, but on a social level. But, you know, the four planets in the fourth house, the Neptune and Venus conjunction, and then the Mercury and Sun conjunction. See, it's just, one is idealism and love and harmony and arts and beauty, and the other one is communicating his purpose, his own personal outlook in life.
Yeah, Mercury and the Sun are actually separated here.
Right, but still in Scorpio. See? So
Where do you see the split personality then, Johanna?
right here between,
Oh, I
it's
see.
right here. And so, because even though they're, you know, not even in a conjunction or anything, or make any aspect whatsoever, it is just that they're in Scorpio, so he keeps what he really wants to communicate, his own purpose, underneath the surface, and just expresses what everybody wants him to express. See, sort of like, he really is an idealist on the inside and loves all kinds of different things, but is afraid to express them, like a repressed person.
Now, why might he be a repressed person?
Well,
He's conditioned to
He's
be by
conditioned.
his
Absolutely. When
right
you are in a
upbringing.
public figure,
exactly, yes.
and when one belongs to the aristocracy, there is an expectation,
Yes,
a
exactly.
behavioral expectation within the family, and there is a behavioral expectation within the culture.
Right,
And I actually see the split side of this coming through the fact that there are oppositions in the chart.
that's right.
That these two planets are tied up in an opposition here with the
Right.
midheaven,
His
and the
identity
moon
is
is
certainly-
tied into an opposition with Mercury
yeah,
in the
exactly.
chart. So that's where the division comes, from being strongly pulled in two different sides.
That's right.
One would suspect that this is somebody who would be quite happy just hanging out on one of his estates.
Right, leave me alone.
And a friend of mine that recently returned from the UK actually visited one of his gardens. I forget which estate it
Oh,
was.
it's beautiful, very beautiful.
And he's very much into organic or biodynamic gardening. And what she mentioned to me that was curious was throughout the gardens, there are these alcoves or grottos which have items in them. And she described it as though the garden was sort of the way the garage might be for the rest of us. People give him things. And so he has to place them somewhere, and they're placed out in the yard. So if you look at it, the house of possessions, Leo, the sun falls in the fourth house.
Yes.
So the home, the land, the estate becomes the display of possessions.
But I think that personality had an influence of his relationship with Princess Di. And so maybe she knew him more than the rest of us, you know what I'm saying? And I think that that personality truly influenced his relationship. So
Now,
Could you say there's maybe a little tug of war between the way he thinks about things and the way his mother wants him to think about
Yes.
things?
absolutely,
Exactly.
because this is the mother, and in the chart, the moon is
Exactly.
dominant.
right.
The moon is the dominant force here at 11.6% of the power. It's also, the moon represents the mother and women in general. It's also in the 10th house, which represents the mother. And so there is an opposition there, although it's wide between the moon and Mercury. It's 6 degrees apart. It nevertheless is a pronounced discord.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, companionship here comes to the 5th house as well. And this is the most harmonious area of his chart.
Mhm.
So, again, love affairs. Mars and Jupiter in Sagittarius. And I think he met someone that works with horses.
Mhm.
There could be a shared interest around that. And that's where a lot of his happiness comes through. It could also be through his children, which are governed by the 5th house.
Right.
One might be very athletic, the other could be very benevolent or philanthropic in some ways. So that's where the joy comes in. The joy may not be through family, because this area, although most important, is also discordant.
Mhm.
His family, he could have great ideals about, and they also stress him out. Mercury opposing the moon. But with his kids, it could be a real source of pleasure for him, or in his romances or love affairs. Now, the public houses are those houses 8, 9, 10, and 11. The 8th house is basically your credit. This is your money as it stands publicly. What others can find out about you, I think all they need is $16 in your driver's license in order to, ascertain your credit history. The 9th house is everything you're telling other people about yourself. This is your publicly expressed opinions. This is your philosophies. The 10th house is your reputation as a whole, how the world tends to see or view you. And the 11th house is those associations that you have that are taken out of the realm of intimacy or family and brought into public standing. These are the people that you may know through more public activities. It might be described as your acquaintances. I've had debates with others. I do believe that really close friendships are governed by the 7th house. Other astrologers I know say no, it's purely 11th house. My opinion is 11th house is more of our casual associations. And the 7th house is our close bonds that we hold with others. So, this is the region of the chart. It's right up at the top, and you can see that alludes to its publicity. So any person whose planets predominate up at that part of the chart, their tendencies are always contemplating their place in the greater world. Even if they think it's what they don't want, if you have a lot of planets at the top of your chart, whatever you do somehow gets noticed or it gets publicized. This is especially true if you have any planets straddling this point in the chart, the midheaven. So any planets on the zenith tend to be elevated, and these tend to be your traits that others know or recognize. So, here, the chart is Jerry Garcia. Public, 528. 65.1% of the chart, and look at that harmony.
Wow. You should never go home. Just stay on out there and party down, bro.
Yeah. So, and the truth is, this is somebody who, you know, even after his demise, continues to have a cult following. So let's look at the public houses. 8th house, we have a conjunction of Uranus and Saturn in Gemini. 9th house, the house of publicity, we have a very close conjunction of Venus and Jupiter in the 9th house.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's a nice aspect.
Do you know
In
how
the-
he died? Does
What?
the 8th house tell us anything about how he died? Did he die suddenly?
Yes, I believe he did.
A heart attack? Or
I'd have to look it up. I don't remember offhand. I was never a deadhead, so
I don't remember either.
I don't have reason to recall such things, but I'm sure we could go home and look that up. I mean, there's two choices.
For
Laura.
this formation in the 8th?
Yeah, you either die suddenly, which is Uranus, or a slow lingering death, Saturn.
Make up your mind.
You got two choices. You know, if this one doesn't get you, this one certainly will. And then the top of the chart, we have Pluto, Mercury, the Sun, all conjunct in Leo. They're 3 degrees apart. And then the 11th house is even aspected with Mars. So it looks here like we have 8 out of 10 planets in the public houses, which is why, of the 3 charts we've looked at thus far, this is so enormously powerful, having close to 2/3 of all the energy. So I like to use this chart because this is somebody who continues to be famous. Now, one of the other things we look at when we look at the chart is what is called the trinities. You can see in the word trinity both tree, meaning 3, and trine, which is the formation that they form to one another. There are 4 trinities, 4 divisions of 3. And they are described as life, wealth, association, and psychism. Let's look first at the trinity of life. Here you can see a trine. The trinity of life embraces the 1st, 5th, and 9th houses. Now the 1st house, if you think about it in terms of life, the 1st house is our constitution. The 1st house is our vitality. It's our physical body. The 5th house is both our love affairs, the things that make us feel passionately about life. It's our creativity, which is one of the ways in which we feel more alive. and its children. One of the ways we continue the process of life by passing on DNA to future generations. The ninth house is our philosophies. What are the ideas that we get excited about? But I also look at it, the ninth house, as also our adventures in life. When we're on an adventure, we generally feel more alive. These are our outings, our field trips, our trips and travels and peregrinations. So what does Zane say? The trinity of life embraces the first, fifth, and ninth houses. The first house influences the constitution and vitality. The fifth house influences the life of the offspring. The ninth house influences the life in relation to religion and philosophy. This trinity corresponds to the fiery signs of the zodiac. Well, we know it doesn't literally correspond to them, but in a sense, there is, in the smaller zodiac of the houses, there is a reflection of the larger zodiac of the signs. And so the houses, the first house corresponds to Aries, fifth house to Leo, and the ninth house to Sagittarius. So, basically, if these are the strong areas of your chart, the things that you are always doing are those things that make you feel more alive. Movement, exercise, lovemaking, sport, performance, travel, adventure. What I left out of those descriptions here was creativity. There's both procreativity, which is passing on your DNA, and there's creativity, which is passing on your means or your cultural DNA. So, Bob Dylan is my example here. And if we look, there are no planets in the first house. But there are 4 in the 5th house, and there is 1 in the 9th house. So 5 planets fall in the trinity of life. That's almost half the power in his chart, 45.9%. And the predominance of that, we can see, is coming not from his philosophies, but from his creativity, the 5th house.
Although his philosophic idealism, and in terms of how he politicized it, had a whole lot to do with what he was expressing in his creativity.
Yes. Were you ever sure what he was saying, though?
Nebulous Neptune, huh? Very.
I love to listen to Bob Dylan songs because when I was a teenager, we loved them. They're poetry.
Yeah.
But I also listen to them now, and I'm always thinking, what's he really saying here? They're just these sort of amazing arrangements of words. So, but we can see here that Neptune at 24 Virgo is aspecting the 5th house planets. Which of them precisely? Neptune trines the moon, it trines Jupiter, it trines Saturn, and it trines Uranus. So it's engaged in a trine to all of them. So do we care if we understand what he's saying?
Nope.
Nah, we just want to hear. And I think I mentioned to you, when we looked at this chart, when we were looking at the houses, dominant 5th house, Bob Dylan is also a very prestigious visual artist. He shows in several galleries, his works are collected. So his creative skills are not just in the realm of entertainment, which the fifth house governs, but there's other creativity that takes place. The trinity of wealth. Houses 2, 6, and 10. Well, these would correspond roughly to the earth signs, to Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. So, second house is our wealth from the perspective of personal property. Sixth house, labor and service. 10th house, business and honor. Now, individuals in whose chart this trinity predominates.
You say
They're looking to feel successful. What is success to them? Generally, it's something they can measure. It's something which has measurable results. So, money making, collecting assets, the workplace, their relationships with their coworkers, and their relationships to those persons that might be considered superiors or individuals that can advance them or advance their status and position in the world. This is the chart of Yves Saint Laurent. Look here, the Trinity of Wealth, 437.52 Astrodynes, 52.5% of his power. Half of his chart is focused around income, labor or service, and status and prestige. We have Uranus in Taurus in the second house. How does Uranus bring money to an individual when it's in the second house?
through expressing individuality.
Okay, great. Expressing individuality, somebody said suddenly. Through trends or fads.
Right.
Where does fashion fit into the sentence with trends or fads? Fashion's always about fads.
That's right.
And Uranus also has a tendency towards wanting to make money through freelance occupations. Now, the sixth house, which has to do with service and labor, there are 5 planets here. Basically, 7 out of 10 planets fall in the Trinity of Wealth. Here we have Mars in Cancer, Pluto in Cancer. They are conjunct, separated by about 3 degrees. The Sun, Venus, and Mercury are all in Leo. And although the Sun does conjunct Venus, it is out of orb of Mercury, being in a cadent house. But Venus and Mercury are conjunct to one another, both at 18 degrees.
What are you saying? The Sun is in conjunction with Venus, but not with Mercury?
Right.
Because of those extra 5 minutes?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong chart. Always helps if you have the...
I was puzzled.
Nope, it is conjunct,
Right.
both Mercury and Venus. And the conjunction of Mercury and Venus is the most powerful aspect of his chart. Well, that, actually, yes, it is the most powerful aspect. The second most powerful it is the second most powerful aspect, and the third most powerful aspect is the opposition of the moon and Mars.
And then the first most powerful aspect would be?
It's a parallel, so you can't see it. It's a parallel between Jupiter and Mars. But the way that expressed in his life, if you know anything about Yves Saint Laurent, he worked tirelessly towards promoting his seasons every year,
So workaholic.
and had the same expectation of the staff.
Yeah. He was able to get done.
Right. So, with Jupiter there were either cash rewards, there was some perk, bonus, motivation, incentive, or he was just so inspiring that people would want to be around him and be part of the process.
Was he a tyrant?
I've never heard that, and because Jupiter was the most powerful planet, he was actually very philanthropic. He did set up different foundations in Paris. And he also suffered from horrible depressions, paralyzing depressions.
Where do you, what would you point to there?
I think Saturn opposing Neptune would be what that is about. Why? What does Neptune do to anything?
Solves it.
Or exaggerates it? So, there would have been an intense, no doubt this was a physiological depression.
You mean like brain chemistry?
Right. But there would have been an internal conflict between idealism and the reality of things. All right, the Trinity of Association. House number 3, which is our neighbors and brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles. House number 7, which is your mate, spouse, partner, companion, your public, and your open enemies. And house number 11, which are your friendships, your more casual associates, or your acquaintances. Zate says, the Trinity of Association embraces the 3rd, 7th, and 11th houses. The 3rd house influences the thoughts and brethren. The 7th house influences partnership and marriage. The 11th house influences hopes and friends. This trinity corresponds to the Aries signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. So, individuals in whose chart the Trinity of Association predominates express a desire to be connected to other people. This takes it into the realm of activities around one's extended family relations, aunts, uncles, cousins, personal and public alliances, and the need to be engaged in groups, organizations, and community affairs. Donald Trump. Trinity of Association. Does everybody know who Donald Trump is?
Oh, yeah.
I can only imagine that he has friends in high places.
And that might be the only friends he has.
He might have put them there too.
Yeah.
The 7th house is empty, but there are 3 planets in the 11th, Uranus and the Sun in Gemini, and Mercury in Cancer. And there's 1 planet in the 3rd house, Jupiter in Libra. Look at that trine from Jupiter to Uranus, 1753 to 1727. Wow. So, in regards to association, there are 274 Astrodynes. It's 35% of the chart, or a third. And look at the harmony associated with that.
Wow.
What is this man interested in?
The high life.
The high life and or the associations he can form with others.
Money.
Life is about alliances. And curiously, although he is, I think to all intents and purposes, I mean, some people are land rich and cash poor. So, but in Donald Trump's chart, I mean, we think of him as being Mr. Money, but money only has 4.2% of his power. Friends has 25.4% of his power.
So where are you looking to meet that?
To
The
this
second house?
Astrodyne report, which, yes, money is the 2nd house, and you have it from a previous class. You don't have it in tonight's
Uh-huh.
notes.
But it was only 4.2, even though Neptune is in that house.
Mhm. Why? How many aspects does Neptune form? Only 4 aspects. Neptune squares Mercury, sextiles Pluto, forms an inconjunct to the midheaven and a semi-square to the ascendant. So there isn't a whole lot of energy there.
So how would you account for his mega wealth richness?
Well,
Through association?
the thing is, Jupiter is his most harmonious planet. He is somebody who may think very optimistically, and with that forming the trine to Uranus, he is drawn in very powerful and productive associations.
What about the fact that, I don't know if this is right or not, he's got Pisces on the 8th house, and he has Neptune in the 2nd house? Isn't 8th house inheritances?
Yes, though I don't know. I don't know really anything about his finances, so I don't know if he...
He got a huge inheritance from his father.
Okay.
That's how he got his wealth initially.
Great.
Oh, and other people's money is 8th house as well.
Right, so he may be able to form collaborations, associations with others. But yeah, the money could come through inheritance and be the seed money. Now,
And he
whether
keeps
or
going
not
through his associations.
it's Neptune squares Mercury, so, you know, sometimes people have what appears to be a lot of money, but it could be a house of cards. What
The
does it
8th house stuff would also square that, that house.
What 8th house
If,
stuff?
the 8th house energy, we were just talking about, you know, that too would make it like a square to,
If there was anything there,
right.
yeah. All right, and last of the trinities, the trinity of psychism. Houses 4, 8, and 10. This would correspond to the water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Zane says the trinity of psychism embraces the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses. The 4th house influences the home and the end of life. The 8th house influences death and inheritance. The 12th house influences sorrows and imprisonment. What a happy bunch they are. This trinity corresponds to the watery signs of the zodiac. Now, individuals in whose chart the trinity of psychism predominates express a desire to be connected to spirit, and they delve into the mysteries of life. This could include activities such as sensitivity to the astral counterparts of environments and homes, such as persons who are able to do divining, a connection to the unseen realm of demons and angels, the 8th house, or the desire to explore inner space through psycho-spiritual techniques, the 12th house. And the chart I chose for this was that of Padre Pio, the Italian stigmatic. If we look here, 331 Astrodynes, 38% of the power. It is also harmonious. Surprising when you read his biography, because this is somebody who really, he had incredible gifts, but struggled with them. Now, if we look, there are no planets in the 4th house, but we have 3 planets in the 8th, Mercury, Pluto, Sun in Gemini, and we have 2 planets in the 12th, Uranus and Jupiter, separated by 19 degrees in the 12th house, both in the sign of Libra. So this was somebody who experienced the stigmata, or the wounds of Christ. He was known to levitate, to bilocate, to be able to read the souls of other people, and to prophesize. And so after being, blessed for a very long time, last year I think it was, or the year before last, he was canonized in the Catholic Church. In addition to all the things I described, fellow brothers in the monastery also claimed that they would hear him banging around in his cell at night, struggling with demons. So there's, when you're that vulnerable, with an 8th house or a 12th house like that, sometimes one becomes just open to whatever is out there. It's like the window's left open. If you leave your window open, you might get a stray cat, you might get a bat coming into your house. So this is somebody who was so psychically open that he not only had gifts where fighter pilots during World War II would describe him as appearing outside their plane. They'd be calling in radio reports saying, I don't know what's going on, but there's this man out here in a brown robe with a beard who's just right outside my plane. All right. So, the societies and the trinities come from the division of the houses. The triplicities correspond to the elements, and they relate to the zodiac. The 4 elements, fire, earth, air, and water. Earth and water signs are feminine. Fire and air signs are masculine. These are good things to know. This is an especially important thing to pull out of a chart, because the dominant element in your chart determines your temperament. Let's look at the element of fire. It's much like the trinity of life. This is Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Now, some keywords which can be used to describe the fiery element would be, they are active, they're animated, they are authoritative, dynamic, eager, enthusiastic, energetic, fervent, lively, inspirational, passionate, vigorous, vital, and zealous. Those words can be used to describe Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, and I'm sure each of you could come up with some words of your own to expand upon the vocabulary. Zane said, the fiery triplicity embraces the signs Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. People born under this triplicity, meaning primarily the sun being in this triplicity, as explained in Chapter 2, Serial, Lesson number 104, Course 10.1, Delineating the Horoscope, tend, I guess that could be 3 dots, period, tend to the sanguine temperament. They possess self-reliance, enthusiasm, zeal, courage, daring, the ability to command others, and a love of activity, in the sense of being able to arouse in themselves and communicate to others initiative and enthusiasm. Their characteristic quality is inspiration. So, individuals in whom the fire signs dominate, they tend to live vigorously and enthusiastically. Yeah, we could describe them as burning the candle at both ends. They're often bombastic, forceful in their ideas, and frequently they push themselves to exhaustion. Marlon Brando. $409.30, 49.2% harmonious. Let's take a look. Sag rising, Jupiter in Sag. Moon, double Aries. Moon and Sun in Aries. Neptune in Leo. Looks like a grand trine in fire to me.
Yeah.
Did this man have energy?
Oh, yeah.
And certainly in his younger days, he was a very vital, energetic force. And very daring. I mean, this is somebody who left Nebraska to go to New York City and take up acting. Let's look at the Trinity of Earth. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. You can see the Trinity. It's very similar to the Trinity of wealth among the societies, or among the Trinities. So, some key words for these signs might be analytical, down to earth, level-headed, matter-of-fact, no nonsense, organized, practical, pragmatic, rational, realistic, sensible, stable, and utilitarian, few of which describe the personality I've chosen. The earthly triplicity embraces the signs Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. People born under this triplicity tend to the bilious temperament. They are not given to bursts of enthusiasm, but express their ideas concretely, having the ability to apply themselves patiently to the affairs of this life and turn all they contact into some material use. On the farm, associated with some industry, or managing some great corporation, they are toilers. In the sense of relying upon reason and the reports of the senses, and in interesting themselves in the affairs of earth that have value here and now. Their characteristic quality is practicality. So, individuals in whom the earth signs dominate tend to live cautiously and methodically. Acquisition and material comfort are important to them. They are strongly interested in process, or how things are done. This is an interesting chart to choose for this, because generally we don't think of Johnny Depp as down-to-earth, level-headed, matter-of-fact, no-nonsense, organized, practical, pragmatic, but most of us don't know him. We only know the persona that is projected. And because in his chart, one of the most powerful aspects is this conjunction of Uranus and Mars in the first house. When we think of Johnny Depp, what do we normally think? Level-headed,
No,
grounded, practical?
absolutely not.
No, what do we
The
think?
opposite.
Yeah, wild, crazy,
individual,
unconventional, individualistic,
Right.
Eccentric, daring. So I chose this chart to show you how we can be oftentimes a composition of different qualities, or we may choose to project a first house persona to the world. Those that know him might see him as being very meticulous, very organized, very down to earth. But this is somebody we only know through the tabloids, through the big screen.
But isn't he a Gemini?
Virgo, isn't
No.
He is a Gemini.
he? He's a
Yeah.
Gemini. Oh.
But, look, Uranus, here we go, Earth,
Yeah.
50.8, that's half of this chart. Uranus in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, Pluto in Virgo, Moon in Capricorn, Midheaven in Taurus, Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Taurus. Methinks it may all be an act.
Yeah, I think so too.
Maybe this is somebody who is so practical that he learned that being this person could bring him the material comfort he desires.
And Gemini rules variety. So, a variety of personalities, things that other people want him to express. So I think he could just play any role that I think he chooses to play.
Yeah.
So he's good
Chooses
in all
the
of them.
diversity.
Yeah, he does.
They're diverse, but they are all almost what? Quirky.
Quirky, yeah.
The parts he chooses are actually all the same in whether it's, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Edward Scissorhands
Yes.
or Dark Shadows. They're all these really oddball, quirky characters. So they're universal in that sense. Air, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. What's that? Bagua?
Bagua.
Bagua, yeah. All right. Altruistic, cerebral, chatty, communal, communicative, friendly, humanitarian, ideological, informative, intellectual, logical, mental, outgoing, rational, social, and talkative. Zane said, come back. The airy triplicity embraces the signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Persons born under this triplicity tend to the nervous temperament. They are mentally alert, volatile, changeable, and socially inclined, desiring to live largely upon the mental plane. They are interested in education, literature, and art, are fond of conversation, and find pleasure in the exchange of ideas. In the sense of desiring refinement and intellectual culture, their characteristic quality is aspiration.
Is this the choleric humor? He was identifying the other humors, and I was appreciating that.
That was two. Maybe it is.
He says lymphatic of the
Water
signs.
signs. Yeah, so this would be choleric.
And lymphatic what would be the classical humor that would correlate with? There was sanguine, bilious, choleric, and oh well.
Yeah.
Never mind. Sorry.
I'm not pulling it up at the moment myself. So, air signs.
Phlegmatic.
Phlegmatic.
Phlegmatic was the fourth. And that would
Phlegmatic, I
correspond to
think,
the
would
lymph.
be
Probably.
lymphatic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Individuals in whom the air signs dominate tend to live in a world of people and ideas. They are social, communicative. However, they tend to vacillate, being pushed along the way by any way the wind blows. All right, Walla Walla. Let's look at the element of air. 45.3%. Where do we have air in this chart? Let's start here with the sun. 1 degree Libra, ascendant 4 degrees Libra. Mars and Mercury at 22 and 23 Libra, respectively. We move around with nothing in Aquarius, but we can see that Jupiter and the Moon are in Gemini. So this gives us 5 planets plus the ascendant in air signs. What do we know about her? She made her living being chatty and communicative and informative and intellectual and outgoing and rational and social and talkative. And getting other people to be talkative.
Opening up. Yeah.
Her livelihood was drawn from getting others into communion with her, getting others to open up and share and talk. She became a spokesperson and a news anchor media personality, which is where the air is in the chart. And water. Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Think of the houses of psychism, the trinity of psychism. What Zane said, well, let's look at the keywords, which could include being caring, compassionate, empathetic, emotional, intuitive, kind, moody, receptive, sensitive, sympathetic, temperamental, and volatile. Zane describes the watery triplicity in this fashion. The watery triplicity embraces the signs Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. People born under this triplicity tend to be lymphatic temperament. Their lives are largely centered in the home and affections. They are sympathetic, timid, dreamy, submissive, given to domestic life, receptive, yielding, mediumistic, and greatly influenced by their surroundings. In the sense that they are chiefly actuated by their feelings rather than by carefully reasoned lines of conduct, their characteristic quality is emotion. So think of it. Cancer, I feel. Scorpio, I desire. Pisces, I believe. None of those imply a rational approach. So, water signs dominant. These are people who live emotionally and passionately. They're guided by their intuitions and their instincts. There are times, however, where their reactive feelings can cloud their judgment. All right, Irma Bombach. She used to write a column. I'm forgetting now what it was called. But she had a syndicated column. Maybe it was just her name. Water. Is that almost 400? 46, 47%. And harmonious. What do we have in water? Sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, Uranus in Pisces, Pluto in Cancer, and the midheaven in Scorpio. What was her column about? Anyone remember?
Home life.
Home life. It was all about home and family and about the idiosyncrasies of relationships. You know, how the darndest things kids say sort of stuff. It was sort of like America's Funniest Videos, but in written form.
Yeah.
And not just banal stupidity. I mean, just really being able to take any event, any subject, and turn that into something worth writing about.
And funny.
You know, we forget that the co-ruler of Pisces is Jupiter, which is humor. You know, we get so caught up in the mystical side of it, but also the advantage she had was the Sun conjunct Jupiter in the first house. This was the chart of a humorist. I mean, probably the only other way she could have gone would have been like Amy Semple McPherson, being a evangelist. That's one way this could have expressed through the first house, trying to get inspiration out there to others along religious lines, along the lines of belief. But she was inspiring people through humor. And through that humor, she inspired people to become more compassionate, because there was a way of looking at the differences between people and placing it in a funny light rather than in the light of aggravation. All right, we're coming down to the finish line, which means that tonight we might actually end class early, if none of you mind.
see the end of the debate.
Oh, yeah. I've been up since 3:30, so I wouldn't mind going on. Movable, fixed, mutable. These are also divisions of the zodiac, and we call them the qualities. They indicate to us these qualities of a person about their general state of being. What level of activity are they moving at? Are they solid, liquid, or gaseous? What separates those three qualities of matter?
Density of molecules.
And that is determined by the speed they're moving at. Gaseous molecules are moving faster than liquid and or solid. Liquid molecules are moving slower than gaseous, but faster than solid. So, let's take a look. The qualities are sometimes called quadruplicities. That's a mouthful, and that is a word that nobody other than astrologers uses. What is a quad?
Four.
You're looking at a quad right here. When I was in high school, good old Samo High, the center plaza of the school was called the quad. So this means that quadruplicities are forming what aspects to one another?
Squares. Challenges.
So there's a very good chance if you have a dominant quality, and we all do have a dominant quality, that this is also a facet of our personality that may express some conflict. Because the planets in that quality are either going to be in opposition to one another, conjunction, or square. So, the movable quality is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. Hard to imagine any of them getting along. It is possible, but the keywords for movable or cardinal quality, we call them cardinal because these are the cardinal signs, the 4 cardinal points. Aries is the spring equinox. Cancer is the summer solstice. Libra is the fall equinox, the autumnal equinox, and Capricorn is the winter solstice. So these are the cardinal signs or the cardinal directions. They tend to be groundbreakers, initiators, they're pioneers. They like to make the first move. So, Zane says, the signs of the movable quality are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. They express the nature of each of the 4 elements in the highest state of activity. Matter in the gaseous state, though chemically the same, is far more active and possesses different qualities than when in the liquid or solid state. People also born under the movable signs are active and energetic and given to change, even as gas generates power and finds it easy to move in various directions, little hindered by gravitation. They break the trails that others follow and start the enterprises that others finish. The natives of Aries pioneer in daring enterprises and adventure. Cancer people pioneer in home building and in foods. Those born under Libra pioneer in literature, art, and social affairs. Well, those belonging to the sign Capricorn are pioneers in business and industry. The signs of the movable quality produce people who are pioneers. That comes from astrological signatures. So basically, movable quality, you are trailblazers in your field of endeavor, and you would rather initiate a project than to stick around and finish it. So my choice was Sandra Day O'Connor. 58.5 immovable signs. Well, where are they? Capricorn ascendant, Saturn in Capricorn, Sun, Uranus, Venus in Aries. Pluto is in Cancer, and the midheaven is in Libra. In what way was this woman a trailblazer?
She was the first woman judge.
On the Supreme Court of the United States. So she definitely blazed the trail for, I forget their names, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the
Sotomayor.
Sotomayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She might have been a literal trailblazer too. You said she wrote an autobiography about being brought up in the country in Arizona.
Arizona, yeah. I don't know if that, to what degree of influence that book had, but all of those Aries planets were there in the third house of writing and private thought. She also was a trailblazer in terms of her own thoughts. And judges are involved in writing. They write what are called briefs. And one of the things that Sandra Day O'Connor would do, she never wanted to be lumped onto the same page with the other conservative judge that was voting the same way as she was. So she almost always wrote a separate brief.
And she was considered a conservative judge. I didn't realize that. That's just my ignorance.
Conjunct, or she has Capricorn and the ascendant.
Saturn conjunct the ascendant in
Yeah.
Capricorn.
Saturn conjunct the ascendant.
But wasn't she there with Roe versus Wade and?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I had the other impression. She'd take her own stand on things anyway. She wouldn't be
Yeah.
programmed by the party lines.
All right. Fixed signs. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. Think of the Sphinx. Body of the bull, paws of the lion, wings of the eagle, head of the man. Inflexible, perfectors, reliable, rigid, solid, unyielding. So any element in its fixed state is in its most solid and perfect form, its most crystallized form. Stain says the signs of fixed quality are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. They express the nature of each of the four elements in the lowest state of activity. Matter in the solid state is rigid, durable, and unyielding. People born under the fixed signs are quite as unbending, firm, and resistant. Solids find difficulty in altering their form and location. And people belonging to the fixed signs are strongly attached to their customary environment, their customary manner of doing things, and their customary methods of thought. They have great resistance to pressure of all kinds, strong endurance, plodding perseverance, and the ability to give close attention to detail. They are not originators and not enthusiastic developers. But when development has reached a high degree, they work out details that constitute improvements. The signs of the fixed quality produce people who are perfectors. So individuals in whom the fixed quality dominates, tend to be rigid, unyielding. They desire that certain things meet their expectations and work tirelessly towards their accomplishment. Their values tend towards the conservative or the tried and true. Yes.
Heard principle as an adjective for the fixed signs.
Well, he does adhere to his
Well,
principles.
that's true, yeah.
What was the quote I gave you in that previous class? You know, my goal in life is to irritate liberals.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And he sticks to his principles. So, let's look here. 43.5%. It is discordant, but much is in this chart. Where are the fixed signs?
Venus and Aquarius.
But we also have the ascendant in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius,
Mars
Mars
in
in Aquarius.
All the angles,
Yeah.
midheaven and nadir.
Yeah.
We have Pluto in Leo,
Leo.
and the midheaven in Scorpio. So, 3 planets plus the midheaven and ascendant are in fixed signs.
Where is opposite Mercury?
All right. Mercury at 1 degree of Capricorn, Uranus at 6 degrees. What does that make for?
In opposition?
Well, it makes for an opposition, but we could consider that, if we look at the symbols,
Mutable.
radical
Yeah.
thinking.
Yes.
Keep in mind, people can belong to the radical left or the radical right.
Pluto's opposite Mars.
Yes, here we have a T-square in the chart in fixed signs. As I mentioned, sometimes if you have a dominant element, it can also be your source of conflict, because you're either going to have oppositions or squares. So, Mars, 22 Aquarius, Pluto, 19 Leo, midheaven, 21 Scorpio.
That's right.
So, Mars and Pluto square the midheaven, and they oppose one another.
It's like they work out through his identity, you know, like that's how other people see him. You know, he's like an obstinate type person expressing through his social identity.
Another thing that is curious about this is that both Mars and Pluto rule Scorpio,
That's right.
the sign of the midheaven.
Exactly.
So the tension that's going on in the chart here
Yeah.
is his reputation, which is the 10th house, the midheaven. It's actually the most afflicted in the chart
Yeah.
because the rulers, there are no planets in the 10th house, and the rulers of that oppose one another and square the midheaven.
Right. So he's antagonizing himself, you know, or antagonizing to bring out what other people, the feedback from other people.
But he's been able to parlay a career out of this.
Oh, yes,
So
definitely.
here we're pulling out something that might be the most discordant element of the chart,
That's right.
but this is someone who's actually been able to make money from it.
Yeah. We should all be so lucky.
Right, which is somewhat contradictory to what I'm going to talk about in class next week when we look at harmony and discord. But I find this to be so curious. This is somebody who has taken one of their most obnoxious traits and parlayed it into a fortune.
That's right. Yeah. Like I said, we should all be so lucky.
Uh-huh.
If I were to try to, it'd backfire right in my face. Never get away with it.
Well, he's had to deal with some of that too.
Oh, yes. But I think he enjoys.
He
You know,
certainly
that's-
bounced back from the
Right.
drug addict trip.
Now, where might
At
that
least-
come from in the chart, do you think?
Got Neptune in the 8th with Saturn.
Yes, they're not in any aspect. I mean, generally we think of, there are two planets that can fuel addiction. Neptune and Mars. Mars, again, is one's passions. Generally, we think of Mars addictions as being more the bottle than anything else.
Well, on the other hand, his Mars is in an air sign, and he was taking anti-pain and antidepressants. I don't know about antidepressants. Painkillers supposedly were the quote culprit.
Yeah, so it was probably oxycodone or Vicodin or one of those prescription, painkillers that people get from street pushers.
And again, they're hard to withdraw from, so they go along with the fixed sign thing.
You would look at his smoking. See, that's another addiction.
Yeah,
He's an
sure is.
addictive person.
Oh. And this is why I say Mars is involved in addictions,
Right.
because it's about our passions.
Right.
Once we get hooked into our passions, they're not easy to unhook from.
That's right.
And in this case, it's tied into a fixed T-square.
Right.
What I've discovered with people with a lot of fixed signs, the attitude can be lump it or leave it. This is who I am. If you don't like it, go home.
Yeah.
Or I don't like what's going on. I'm going to pick up my dolls and go home.
Yeah.
That's part of that unbending rigidity. It's non-conciliatory. So the same thing could happen possibly with someone. There are people who, again, love their addictions and want everyone else to love it too. And they're recalcitrant. They're not going to give it up for nothing. All right, mutable. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. The keywords for the mutable signs. What does it mean to be mutable? Changeable.
Adaptable.
So, they are adaptable, they are adapters, they are appeasing, assuaging, conciliatory, flexible, they tend to be middlemen, they are mollifying. Mollifying. The signs of the mutable quality are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. They express the nature of each of the four elements in a medium state of activity. Matter in the liquid state, though possessing the same chemical elements as when gaseous or solid, is more subject to gravitation and less aggressive in its chemical action than when gaseous, but more active and yielding and less given to permanence than when in the solid state. The mutable signs are a happy medium between the excessive activity of the movable signs and the stubborn resistance of the fixed signs. Liquid cannot force its way through an aperture as easily as can gas, but once a channel has been established, it quickly follows this line of least resistance. Persons born under the mutable signs seldom break trails, but follow on the heels of pioneers. As liquid conforms to the object with which it is in contact, so mutable people are the most adaptable of all. The signs of the mutable quality produce people who seldom originate an enterprise. They are the developers. So, individuals in whom mutable qualities dominate tend to be conciliatory and agreeable. They are able to blend ideas from different disciplines, often creating hybrids. They will frequently run with the ideas of others. So the chart I've chosen is that of Albert Benjamin, the author of the Brotherhood of Light Lessons. We can see here 66.8 and very discordant. Why is that? Well, let's take a look. Sag rising, Venus in Sag, Mercury in Sag, Mars in Sag, Sun in Sag, Jupiter in Gemini, Midheaven and Uranus in Virgo. Is anyone detecting much like Rush Limbaugh?
Yeah.
There's a T-square here. Only if your T-square is in mutable signs, are you going to be perceived as being as obnoxious as if it's in fixed signs? No, because fixed signs are recalcitrant, whereas mutable signs are going to be adapters. Sun opposes Jupiter, and they're both squaring the midheaven of Uranus. Again, just as, I mean, this is pretty darned affliction here, don't you think? Look at this discord. You remember from Rush Limbaugh's chart how he took the worst aspect in his chart, his T-square, and parlayed it into his livelihood? Zane did the same, though he didn't quite make a fortune from it, as Limbaugh has done. But look, Sun opposed Jupiter. He revived, this is again mutable signs, he revived the stellar religious tradition. Both are squaring Uranus, the planet of astrology and cycles in general. So seeing this aspect in a chart, one would really be concerned about going down that route.
Which route?
Choosing astrology as a profession. But he wrote volumes and volumes, not only the Brotherhood of Light Lessons in the case over there, but in these other shelves we have some books that he wrote under his own name, Albert Benjamin. He wrote several volumes in his own name. And on top of that, he was a naturalist, constantly contributing articles to conservation societies.
Both he and Rush have the moon in the second house.
Let's see. Yes, they do. And I do know that Albert Benjamin inherited from his mother Cancer rules the 8th house. The moon, the mother, falls in the 2nd house. So he inherited from his mother's estate, and all of that money was put into the Church of Light to fund printing books. Now, the moon in Limbaugh's chart also governs the 6th house, which has Cancer on it. So money could come through perhaps colleagues, co-workers, or this may be sponsors.
I lost how you saw that. What were you pointing to there?
In Rush Limbaugh's chart,
Oh, no,
Zane's chart,
yeah,
the moon,
yeah.
is the
In the
governor, is the ruler of Cancer, which is on the 8th house of inheritance.
Yeah, that's what I was.
The moon we also consider to be feminine and ruling the mother or the female.
And there it is in the second.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I guess you then switch to looking at Limbaugh's chart.
Right, only because she pointed out a similarity
Right.
of having the moon in
Right.
the second house. So chances are, who knows? I mean, I don't know if men or women are the greatest followers of Rush Limbaugh.
Angry men with toxic livers.
Right, we might think that, but who knows? If we actually have a statistical analysis, it could turn out to be
Anybody who wants to vicariously be angry have their ire.
Could be women that find that sexy.
People that have a bad day.
People that have a bad day. Yeah. All right. So we're going to end class about 10 minutes early tonight. We have one last class left in the series. First off, are there any questions related to just taking these generalities and getting information?
How do you come up with the final number? Maybe that's how.
It's in the Astrodyne manual.
Oh, it's in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't give that to you tonight, but
Okay.
there is a whole mathematical formula clearly outlined as to how to measure it.
I think I understand.
Okay.
Well, this is incredibly helpful because unlike a dominant house with the stellium in it, etc., we can look at these summaries of groupings and see heavy emphasis that we wouldn't have seen otherwise just glancing at a chart.
Yeah.
It doesn't, these things don't pop out to the eye as blatantly as some of the other things we were considering, but they're
Exactly.
every bit as important.
They are, and that's why we measure them, and that's why they're so important in doing an analysis. When we go back to temperament, knowing the dominant element of someone. Again, if we're looking at relationships and compatibility, that gives us a lot of information about who they will get along with. If we look at the quadruplicities, whether one is movable, fixed, or mutable, that might describe at what position you might want to enter an industry, depending on whether you need to be the idea person, whether you need to be the person that's, grinding the lens at the end of the project, or the person who's the middleman, the go-between between the product and the public somehow. So this gives us really vital information about charts that has to be taken into the whole story that we're telling someone.
Do you, when you look at the quadruplicities, do you my original astrology teacher taught me to look at the cardinal signs as starting out a season. They have moved the weather into a new tone, and then the fixed signs are right in the middle of that season where you think it's going to be summer forever or winter forever, you know? And then the mutables are when the weather's getting ready to change to the next season, preparing the ground for
The big
shifting.
shift. Yeah.
Right, and I found that very helpful to remember the time of year and as part of those qualities.
Right, and the fixed signs, at least in the European Northern tradition and Celtic calendar, they placed a strong emphasis not only on the equinoxes and solstices, but on the midpoints between those, which fall in the fixed signs. Yes. And so the major holidays were associated with that. The next one coming up being All Souls Day,
And we had Lammas in
August.
August. Beltane
Beltane
is
May
another
1st.
one.
and in bulk is February 2nd, which was St. Bridget's Day, or the Feast of Candlemas, a Catholic tradition. So, there you have it.
Thank you, Christine.
Yeah.
Oh, so next week is a curious class, because I'm going to start it off with what I originally planned, which is, let's look at harmony and discord in a chart, and how do we capitalize on that? How do we work with that? But the second half of the class, which will probably be more than half, is actually going to be devoted to looking at elections and looking at charts of the candidates. We're going to look at the influence of the Saturn and Jupiter cycle charts over the voting public. And we're going to look at the charts of the two chief candidates, being Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Along with that, we're going to look at their running mates,
Oh, good.
Paul Ryan and Joe Biden. So, see what kind of information we can gain from that. And depending on, the candidate of your choice and your philosophies, you'll know whether to get excited or completely depressed. So, there you have it. All right, see you next week.
Great.
Wednesday.